Let me start with a short introduction and explain what it is. This is a webinar, and we start in this series of webinars with Community Energy Toolkit. But this is a series of webinars organized by the Human Development and Capabilities Association, thematic group on technology, innovation, and design. In short, this is a group of academicians and practitioners who are dealing with human face of technologies, how human capacities affected by technologies. Are we expanding freedoms or we are restricting freedoms? So this is our idea. We are very happy to collaborate with UNDP, and I represent UNDP here, and with a special program of UNDP called Digital X, and I welcome Jose and Lorena at the part of this, and we have Caroline from Human Development Capability Association, who is a co-chair of this thematic group.
Yeah.
We have a lovely group from COMET who will talk later on. So now I would like to pass the floor to Caroline to tell us a little bit about Human Development Capability Association. Then Jose and Lorena could provide a short introduction about Digital X, and then floor go to the COMET colleagues. So yeah, please.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me well?
Yes, loud and clear.
Great. Okay, so I'm Caroline Kuhn. I work at the University of Bath Spa in England. I'm an educator by trade, is what I do. I did a lot of mathematics education for a long time in Venezuela. And then I did a lot of research and I completed my PhD in that space of technology, but the human side of it. So what's the role of the humans in, let's say, the mediation of anything we would like to mediate through technology, but always, I think, looking at the human element. And more than anything, I think I am very interested in the idea of agency. And I think there is nowadays, with all what's happening, artificial intelligence, this idea that agency is not anymore with us or with the humans. And I think, yes, it is. And this Human Development Capability Association is I think, is really like an association that serves as an umbrella for all of us that are interested in the development of capabilities, and then in different thematic areas. And in our case, it's technology. So how technology might foster the development, the enhancement with its constraints of human capabilities. And I think this project is exactly that. It shows how, with its constraints and with the things that are always in the way, but how it really is meant to enhance the well-being and the future, maybe not immediately, but capabilities of people. So that is me. And I'm very glad to be here. And thank you for putting this together, all of you, and coming and giving this webinar. So that's my side. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Caroline, for introduction of Human Development and Capability Association. And indeed, this is a very big topic in our work and research, empowerment and agency, because if we not doing empowerment and we not pay attention to agency, we could see a lot of undesirable effects. That's why I was so excited when Jose and Lorena told me about this project and a number of other projects which Digital X doing. So Jose, Lorena, please explain us what Digital X is doing and what is the approach and why it's so exciting.
Sure, thank you, and thank you very much, Caroline, for this beautiful introduction. I think the Digital X catalog was in fact born as a way of linking these amazing solutions with the work of UNDP. And UNDP, we have the means of being on the field in 170 different countries. We are working with our government counterparts, constantly trying to understand and assess what their different challenges are, right? But then we figure out now, how can we help governments and UNDP colleagues make stop reinventing the wheel in some sorts and try to work with solutions that are already embedding the human component into their digital programmatic work, such as the great work that COMET is doing. And in that sense, we built the Digital X catalog. I'm just going to showcase very quickly here. What we're trying to do is we built a catalog of around 100 solutions that have already been pre-vetted by the Chief Digital Office. And with the goal for country offices and governments to really find it as an inspirational source at the moment where they're going to start designing a digital intervention. It's a very simple in its way. You can sort here by different thematic areas, etc. But what's most important is all these solutions have already this human element embedded into it. And part of our role as Digital X is not only making these solutions available to all country offices, but continue finding and also matchmaking these amazing solutions to the programmatic work in country offices. So I'm just going to leave it like that. I'm very, very happy, inspired by the work of COMET. So I'd love to leave the floor to them so that they can explain us further the work they've been doing in the past. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Jose. And without further ado, dear colleagues from COMET, the floor is yours. Please tell us what you are doing and how it works. And we have question and answer section. Our participants could ask question there, and we will respond at the end. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. We're so honored to be here and to be, the first in this webinar series. So my name is Ayu, and I'm the managing director for COMET. And online with my colleagues from COMET, there's Ainina and Carla. I'm going to take a quick second to share my screen. And can everybody see my screen?
Yes, all great.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, we can. Thank you.
Okay. So COMET, which is short for the Community Energy Toolkit, is really meant for community engagement and demand exploration for sustainable mini-grids. And, no story is complete without a little bit of history. COMET actually was born out of a nonprofit organization, out of which we came out of. Energy Action Partners was founded in 2014 as a nonprofit organization working in the space of energy access, primarily to promote community development through off-grid energy access. It's very important to mention here that actually Energy Action Partners, a lot of the organizational values was born out of the human development capability approach and trying to use energy access as a platform to really, look at the capability sets of communities and really think more holistically about not just electricity connection, but thinking more about what does electricity really do for communities and how do they get involved in the process and, a lot of the value of agency, how do they get involved where they can articulate for themselves the development outcomes that they want to see out of electricity or energy access, and then how do they enable that? And so they get to articulate and self-define for themselves what capabilities they want to enable from electricity access. So the context that our team really works in is this area of off-grid electricity. And, as it stands right now, I think a lot of us here know that SDG 7 is not on track to be achieved by 2030. Over 700 million people still are without modern electricity access. It's sort of in the space, we know that to reach these communities, the solutions that are available to us are a wide range of off-grid solutions that range from solar lights to solar home systems to mini grids. We work in the space of mini grids because we do believe in enabling a lot of economic development and activity. And mini grids really are at the electricity access level, which would enable that. However, as we were working in the space, we started to recognize a lot of sort of dominant priorities in the discussion around mini grids. A lot of the innovation, a lot of the investment is going into really advancing technology, looking at regulatory environments, business models, finance, which are all extremely important and necessary in order to deploy mini grids and really achieve SDG 7. However, we noticed that a lot of this is on the supply side, and nobody was really working on the demand side or the community side of mini grids. And so, a lot of the issues with mini grids, there's a lot of problems with it's very challenging to deploy mini grids, which is quite a complex technology. And you're deploying it in rural, remote settings and areas, and it's actually becomes a very complex socio-technical sort of question, and a lot of issues arise when communities are not really part of the question of design, development, implementation of mini grids. And so we were really we decided to focus on this part of the mini grid problem, is on the demand side of things. And so to us, it was really key and really important to try and implement solutions that involved communities and had a high level of community engagement. So it was, when you look at mini grid projects, you have varying levels of community engagement. The most basic level of community engagement that is commonly done is sort of engaging the community to get information from them on how to design the best system for them. That is, a lot of it is done through surveys and questionnaires, and it can be quite a one-way exchange of information. And so there is community engagement there, but we consider it to be kind of like at the bottom level of community engagement. If you increase community engagement, where now there starts to become a two-way exchange, where you involve the community so that you're also learning from them. And now it starts to be a two-way process where you're learning from the community, they're also learning from you in terms of if you are an external party trying to develop a project, they get a better understanding of what it means. What is the mini grid going to look like? What does it mean for us? How much is it going to cost? However, we do think that there's a higher level of engagement that can be implemented here. And this is the level of engagement that we're trying to achieve, where it's not just a two-way exchange, but there's involvement and sort of meaningful ownership over the system. And so at this level, they basically own the process, own the system. And this is really what we were trying to achieve when we first started out many years ago in designing and developing COMET. There's many sort of challenges in the mini grid space that we were trying to achieve by creating this new sort of community engagement process. These are some of the more common challenges that are recognized and acknowledged in the mini grid space, and is oftentimes said as very key issues that are preventing mini grids from scaling up. So the first is that in rural areas, demand is low, right? We're talking about rural communities that are very new to electrification, and of course, it's a new technology. It's less experience with what electricity can do for them. A lot of times, communities are very hesitant to use a lot of electricity, obviously, because they don't know what it's going to mean for them in terms of costs and also the value of the service that is being provided to them. When this happens, capacity of mini grids are underutilized. And this can be a big problem, because usually when you install mini grids, if it's oversized, then it becomes very expensive. And then now you start to get into issues of not just, non-affordability for end users, but also that the mini grid becomes not feasibly viable, right? There's also a third issue that we're trying to kind of address here, and it's related to the second one, where in order to right-size mini grids, you have to come up with forecasts and demand assessments which are more or less going to match the expectations of the community. And this is really difficult to do. because we're talking about, again, communities that have no experience with or less experience with electrification. And, just going in to ask them with surveys and questionnaires can be a challenging process. So the opportunity in the mini-grid space is really to innovate in the area of community engagement and on the demand side of mini-grids. And this is kind of what we set out to do. We wanted to kind of innovate in this space, and to us, technology is an enabler. And so we wanted to see how can we use technology to enable these more meaningful and substantive community engagement. And so this is where we started to develop COMET. And COMET really is what it is essentially is it's a software solution that simulates a mini grid system. You can design very different scenarios in mini grids. So you can design it to have a different size, different technologies, different tariffs, different management structures. And then you take it into communities to run community workshops where you walk them through these different scenarios. So it kind of looks like this. So on the right here is an image of what a workshop would look like. It's in a focus group discussion format. And so communities gather, they're in groups, and each group is given a device or a console, and the device operates like an electricity connection. It's all networked on a local Wi-Fi ad hoc network, so it doesn't require the internet. You can set up a local Wi-Fi network, and then all the devices are connected to simulate a mini-grid system. So then the facilitator will walk through different scenarios, and we've designed different modules around common sort of mini-grid topics. One is exploring demand, and that's really to get community participants to understand the level of service that's being provided to them, costs as well of electricity to them. And then we've also designed a workshop module around demand side management. So that's for systems that may be big in size and trying to come up with different strategies for demand management. And then on the other side of that is if capacities are being underutilized, how do we stimulate demand? Tariff and payment structures. What is a best tariff payment structure that's best suited for the community and the local institutions? So we try as best as possible to design or build solutions using COMET that are best fit for the local institution. So if there is a governance structure in place already, we try and make use of that. If there are existing practices and mechanisms for sharing resources, as mini grids are really just a resource, right? Like a shared resource in terms of electricity, then we try to make use of that as well and use COMET to communicate a lot of that, those technical concepts to communities and how they can use existing mechanisms with electricity management as well. We also run productive use workshops. And so that's around encouraging, economic activity in communities. And then we also have all female workshops for communities where there is a clear need to have separate workshops where, women and children can also explore COMET on their own. Essentially, then, COMET becomes a demand assessment tool or demand exploration tool. And then it also becomes an educational tool, because communities are able to walk through scenarios and really understand what electricity would mean for them. So this is kind of, in short, the COMET process, and we use an iterative process. So we would normally have COMET, we would try and do pre-workshop social baseline activities. That can take the form of social mapping activities, or if there are existing surveys and questionnaires, and that's just for us to get a better understanding of the community and the local context. And then we have COMET workshops. And then what comes out of COMET workshops are outputs and outcomes that can then be put into action plans with the local community. Down here is the workshop flow, where usually you'd have, you'd start out with an introduction to the workshop. You would let the community explore the software, see what they can do. And when we let them explore, we really mean let them explore, as in we allow all sorts of behaviors that is encouraged just for them to see what they can do with a mini-grid system. We would rather that they explore it using a simulation process than in real time, in a real system. And what this means is, if you want to try and there's a lot of mini grids with issues such as theft as well, electricity theft. And so we encourage people to just try out what would happen if you didn't pay for your electricity, for example, right? What would happen if you used way too much? What happens to the system then, and things like that. And then we enter sort of the workshop modules, and that's an iterative process. So that is, we start out with a module that allows them to understand, for example, how to build out their load profiles. And then we move to another module where then we introduce a new thing such as tariff payment. And then we introduce a new thing such as demand side management, and so on and so forth. A lot of discussion happens. We are trying to understand how communities view electricity. We're trying to understand how they intend to use it. And then we're also trying to understand how they make decision making in the community, and also the dynamics, the local dynamics that are at play. These are all extremely important and gives you a really good sense of the output files that you get. What is a lot of the nuanced information that you wouldn't get from surveys and questionnaires? How is that impacting the load profiles, and how you would implement or install management structures for the mini grid system? These are just some examples of different places that we've done workshops. It can, as you can see, there's sort of many different ways that you can run it. It's an extremely flexible tool. In Nepal, we've done it outside, which was our first time doing it outside. You can do it in community halls, you can do it in schools, people's homes, different settings. And it gets very lively. And sort of a lot of fun, because people are feeling like they're essentially playing a game because they're running through simulations. We like to have participants in groups also, because there is a lot of peer learning that happens when they're in groups. They're discussing a lot of decisions, such as why did you use that appliance, or how much are you paying for your electricity, and there's a lot of back and forth that happens as well, and that allows the facilitators to get a glimpse into how communities are organized. So there are, with COMET being a very flexible tool, you can use it in the different stages of mini-grid projects. At the very beginning, in the project planning phase, it's usually used as a demand assessment tool. So to get a good sense of what the community will use electricity for, and how much they're willing to pay for it. Very important questions when you're trying to design a project. Once designs have been fixed, then it's used for end user recruitment or training. So then at that point, it's to invite people to sign up for mini grids. After it's already been installed, it's operating, then usually it's used to kind of try and fill in gaps that the mini grid has. For example, if it's underutilized, how do we stimulate demand? If it's overutilized, how do we manage demand? If there's a need to revise the system, then COMET is also brought in to kind of look at where the community is at and how can we revise the system. So you saw earlier that there's kind of the workshop format. There's the facilitator view of COMET, and then there's the end user view. This is the operator experience. So on their user interface, they can see in total how much the whole system load profile is. They can see the health of the system. They also control the simulation.
I'm just wondering, do you have slides? Because we can't see them. So we see you, but we can't see your slides. If that is okay, that's fine. But you might be thinking that we're watching your slides.
No, I see slides.
Oh, I don't.
Me too.
Sorry, then it's me. I don't see them. That's fine. Don't worry. It's me.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is the end user experience. So from on the end user side of the user interface, We've tried to keep it quite as simple as we can. So not too many texts, not too much text, there's only very limited sort of things that they can do with this. They're just supposed to buy appliances, turn them on and off, and then view the system load profile. And this is just because we want to be able to focus the modules on the specific topics. And so then, they can focus on what they're meant to do in the different modules, and then kind of just focus the learning on what the module is meant to do. So basically, it is a simulation where, you'll see the clock running, and then the facilitator will basically, say, okay, we started the day at 6 a.m. What do you usually use at 6 a.m.? And the clock will move, and then you can turn on and off appliances and see how it impacts your load profile. We encourage participants to keep an eye on the load profile. So if they turn on an appliance where they see the load profile just jumping, then that gives them an idea that it's a high-powered appliance. It's also a great way to show them the difference between power and energy, which is extremely important in solar mini grids. So then, if they turn an appliance on, even if it's not a high jump in their load profile, but they keep it on for a really long period of time, then that also means that there's a lot of energy that's being used. So now we're just going to go through very quickly some past case studies, just to kind of show how it's been used. This was one of our very first community deployments in the Malaysian state of Sabah in Malaysian Borneo. This was used in existing microhydro communities. So we don't only use COMET for solar systems, but they can also be used for microhydro. And this was in existing microhydro systems that had been in operation for over 5 years, and they needed some revision. So for example, in one community, people weren't really paying for the system, and they weren't able to collect sufficient revenue to maintain it. And so they were using COMET to kind of communicate to the community why it wasn't a good idea to not pay for electricity. In another community, there was some conflict with land-related conflict with the microhydro system. And this also impacted the sort of the management structure of the microhydro. And so they were using COMET to also explain to the community why it was in the best interest of everyone to kind of, pull together revenue, fix the system, resolve the land issue, and then continue kind of running the microhydro. This was last year, so a bit more recent, in Indonesia. And these were with solar systems that were being built. The systems had been fixed and designed. And so what COMET was being used for this was like kind of that second stage that I talked about earlier, where it was being used to communicate the tariff structures to communities. The tariff structures was kind of complex because it was being sold in tiers of energy, which means that it was very difficult for communities to really understand what that meant for them. In tier 1, what is that power, right? Like it's very difficult for them to have a sense of what type of appliances they can use. So COMET was brought in to kind of communicate that. And it was an interesting deployment because before COMET, everyone was kind of signing up for the lowest tier because, they're unsure whether they can afford it. And then after the COMET deployment, then a lot of folks actually switched to higher tiers because they realized that actually they can afford it. And it was the level of service that they were willing to pay for. This was a case study in Somaliland, in the Horn of Africa. This was an interesting project as well because what was being developed was a solar system, but very specifically, they were trying to size the storage. This might be sort of counterintuitive, but they wanted to size it smaller. And they wanted to see the developer wanted to see what are communities willing to accept? Like how small can they really go with the system? And so what kind of demand side management was possible? And so this is what COMET was used for in those sites. In this specific community, as you can see, we ran COMET, kind of exploring the demand. And at first we got this gray chart here. where you can see that, you know, it's a lot of energy that was being used. And so then we implemented some demand side management where we said, okay, we're going to start limiting households and the community system as well. And then that chart, you know, that energy plot kind of started to come down to the blue line here. And then we thought, well, you could also implement a time use tariff, right? So we also implemented that on top of the demand side management and started to shift. You can start to see that the energy starts to shift from nighttime to daytime use, which is what we want to encourage them to do. So this was kind of in Somaliland. And let me go on to... So currently, COMET has been used in 29 communities to date, because, you know, we've done quite some more work in the last couple of months. Done it across 6 countries, and we've begun working in the Pacific as well, in Fiji, which is very exciting for us. So now I'm gonna just take a look at the work that we've been doing with UNDP, Nepal, and Bajura. And really the question that we were trying to answer with UNDP in Nepal was, there are a lot of these existing microhydro power systems. And, you know, in Nepal, microhydro is a mature technology, and there's sort of thousands of systems. However, the question was, can we put electric cooking on these systems as well? So COMET was sent in to assess community demand for electric cooking. And then to also, you know, at the same time, you know, COMET is not just for demand assessment, but also, like I mentioned, like a capacity building tool. And so to build community capacity to understand the potential for electric cooking. And then if possible, kind of identify, you know, possibilities to fit electric cooking onto load profiles. So basically what we did when working with UNDP in Nepal, we engaged and trained UNDP teams and also other teams that UNDP had identified. And then we also co-deployed COMET in 3 mini-grid sites and ran it, you know, in 15 workshops. We ran 5 per mini-grid because the communities are quite big and we wanted a larger sample size of participants. So in total, we had 494 participants, and we also ran some surveys to kind of understand the learning outcomes for the deployments. So this is a case study from one of the communities that we ran, you know, COMET in. As you can see, the blue line is without electric cooking, and the orange line is with electric cooking. There still needs to be some work here on kind of how we could fit this into existing management structures. But in terms of running it with the community, there were, you know, there was a lot of work in the workshop modules to communicate to the communities what type of appliances are useful, what type of appliances, discussions also around which appliances better suit their cooking habits, and then also costs, right? What can they actually afford? Both in terms of purchasing appliances, so upfront costs, and then also in terms of the electricity costs as well. And so we found that there was a lot of eagerness and interest in using electric cooking. And costs were definitely an issue, but it was more of buying the appliances rather than the electricity costs. That didn't seem to be a huge deterrent. This is expected, of course, that, you know, people are going to cook at the same amount of at the same times in the day, and so the peaks are all happening at the same time, which makes it a little difficult to shift around cooking times. Communities were quite familiar with, you know, sort of hot plates or induction cook stoves, but, you know, electric pressure cookers are probably better suited to the local sort of cuisine and the local cooking styles. I'm also going to just share very quickly some of the interest in appliances. So as you can see that, there was a big interest in sort of the electric pressure cooker. But then we also did want to, mention that there was a lot of interest in other appliances as well. So not just cooking appliances. And so this is kind of a snapshot of in terms of, aspirational use for appliances. There's, freezers are important as well to communities, and definitely rice cookers. And you can see the difference in that. We're still working with the UNDP team to kind of work out what this could look like in terms of an action plan, or how to take it to the next stage, and also verifying some of these results with them as well, with the field teams. I think I'm going to stop there and kind of like take questions now. I shared a lot, and I'm sure that there's questions around our methodology or other case studies or things that we've seen.
Thank you very much, Ayu. It's a really rich presentation and a lot of information, and I personally have a lot of questions and comments and things like that. But first of all, maybe our participants, I don't see questions in Q&A section, but please feel free to, I see. I have a question from chat from Alom. Alom, please, you could unmute yourself and ask your question. Okay, I think Alom has some problem with speaking, but let me read the question. I am a Rohingya refugee and I forced to Myanmar from Myanmar to Bangladesh in 2017 because Myanmar government actions. So I'm living in Rohingya refugee camp in Cox's Bazar, Bangladesh. 6 years ago, human rights activist, chairman of Myanmar Peace Human Rights, and I'm serving for our Rohingya refugee to get peace and rights. What are the opportunities for me? Any suggestions? Any comments?
I'm wondering if the opportunities are around to get involved in the COMET work, or maybe for energy access.
I think both.
For both, yeah. I think in terms of projects for energy access or needs for energy access, I'm happy to discuss that. If you want to maybe shoot me an email and we can see what we can do about that. In terms of getting sort of involved with COMET, it's a similar answer. You can definitely reach out to me and we can discuss that further. But there's lots of opportunities to engage with communities or other stakeholders in the space to bring COMET to different communities and areas. So that's like kind of like the short answer. But I think I can also leave leave our email address here also. Please reach out to us.
Great, and I also typed in chat links to all resources we mentioned, and it will be in chat. Thanks. And then I have a question, and I actually have two questions, if I may. One question is, you mentioned at some point that this engagement could resolve some conflicts. Could you elaborate a little bit more on this? And second, I find your Nepal chart extremely interesting because it shows this quite big volatility in demand following introduction, e-cooking, right? So, and that's quite interesting how COMET could spot these and suggest solutions. Could you tell what were next steps? How people discuss about this, that new technology promote new risks, and we should balance. So that's 2 questions. Thanks.
Yeah, so the first question was around how COMET can be used to resolve conflicts, I think, especially conflicts that are related to the energy system, right? And it can take many different forms. It can be, the one that we dealt with was sort of land management, around where the poles are going for and who should pay for them. That was like the key question there. But we've also seen conflicts around demand management. For example, disagreements on what's the best form of demand management, whether it should be everyone uses the same amount of power, everyone uses the same amount of energy. Those can be different things depending on the technology. So what was useful was that COMET was used to, in the case of who should be paying for things. One COMET was used to show that it can, if you actually collect the revenue consistently, you can actually save quite a lot of money for a community fund, and that's a shared fund based on what communities consider fair to charge. For example, some communities charge a flat fee for just, as long as you're connected, you pay the same amount of money. Everyone pays no matter what their usage is. Some communities pay a per kilowatt hour charge. And we don't, it depends on the community organization and sort of the community institutions and their local values, because we've seen different communities side by side, same general makeup, same general sort of structure, but very different values in terms of what's fair. And so then they're using COMET to see, okay, if we were to collect this kind of revenue 6 months down the road, we actually do have sufficient money in the community fund to use to resolve, issues such as these that require resources. So that's kind of how it was used in that use case. In terms of, how you pay for things and all that, we actually, this is, I like to say, is our ideal situation. We run a workshop in a community and we start to see communities take over the process, right? And so, for example, we've seen this a couple of times, especially with, if they feel comfortable with this, they start to, stand up and say like, this is exactly what I've been trying to tell everybody about. If we use all our freezers at the same time, we're going to max out the system and then there's no more power for the rest of the night. Examples like that, right? And it's great because that means that they're starting to see that, you can use this tool to communicate things with each other that are normally difficult to do. And then we can kind of step back and then the community takes over the process. That's like the ideal workshop, really. Like then we don't have to do anything and we can just sit there and help them with, running the simulation and basically being tech support. The second question that you asked was around the Bajura use case, right? And the volatility. I think it also needs to be said here that this is a very big community. There's over 1,500 households, which means that there's a lot of variability and decisions at the household level. When you scale it up and everyone's making the same decisions, then it actually starts to impact the load profile, right? Yes, COMET can catch a lot of these things because the conventional way of doing these load profiles is you run surveys and questionnaires and you ask communities, what are you going to use every hour of the day? And usually the resolution is 1 hour. So you don't really get the resolution that COMET does, that COMET gets, because you're usually doing an hourly profiles. And also it's very sort of based on how you ask the questions. This is another thing as well. If you ask the questions a certain way, communities will answer a certain way, and then you get load profiles that are arguably just based on the dynamics of the person asking the survey and the person answering. So with COMET, you get folks putting in how they expect to use electricity. And actually, if you go back to I think we have the case study from Somaliland. What was interesting here was the developer did not expect the load to start rising so early in the morning. And it was because they were kind of forgetting that there's actually a lot of lighting load because of morning prayers. Because Somaliland they do the 5 prayers a day, and that was actually very interesting. So I don't know if I answered your question, Michal, but
yes, that's very useful. And I saw the hand from Jose. Jose,
And
please.
I also have a question whenever Jose is ready.
Caroline, go ahead. Please go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I'll wait for you. Don't worry.
I was gonna ask Ayu. I really loved how you're framing it. Like the use case of Nepal is framed under a very specific question, right? It's e-cooking viable for Nepal micro hydropower systems, right? But I'm wondering, could you give us a little bit of more context on what's the ideal situation for our UNDP colleagues, for example, to be looking into their mini grid so that they turn out to COMET and say, hey, COMET, we need to figure out this particular question. So I don't know if you can very briefly go through some other potential use cases so that our UNDP colleagues really can get a grasp of, at what moment they think of you as a potential supplier. Yep.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a good question, a very difficult question as well, because of just like COMET being so flexible and you can use it in so many different use cases, right? And that's why kind of like I try my best to kind of frame it in the project stages of mini grids. And so these are the more common use cases where for example, in Fiji right now, it's at the first stage of project planning and development, where it's the use case is normally they would go in and do surveys and questionnaires to kind of assess community demand. However, that means that, if they're trying to cover more than 50 sites, that's going to take them a considerable amount of time and energy and resources. And so what they're doing is they're taking COMET in and, every day just covering as many households as they can, getting them gathered, and then, doing as many households as they can. And so that becomes a great way to do it. One, you can cover more households, so the sample size is bigger. Two, you're doing it systematically. So if you're running the workshops exactly the same way that you're running it in all the communities, you're getting the data, and it's, you can argue that it's less biased because you're running it exactly the same way. It's data driven because you're using a digital tool, so you're getting the output files, and then it's easier to compare, right? Like from community to community. Of course, you still want to capture a lot of the nuanced information. So those are all the side notes that you're going to have to explain the load profiles. But you still, it's still an easier way of doing it. Yeah, and then there's the use case of I think the one from Indonesia is a great one, because that's something which a lot of people tend to like have trouble with. Like, okay, you built the mini grids and people aren't using it. And in a mini grid system, it's actually, you want to use as much as you can in terms of the capacity that's being produced. Because if you don't use it, then that energy is already being produced, it's wasted. So you want to encourage people to use, as much of the mini grid. And what we usually like to do in those sort of workshops is show the load profile and the empty spaces in a load profile, and try to like see, okay, how can we come up with different ways of using electricity that can fill these load profiles, right? And so that's a great way to do it as well, to like stimulate demand. And then, yeah, like I said, like with Indonesia, getting people to understand sometimes, complicated tariff structures, and then getting them to sign up for services. And I think those are two use cases which are quite common in the mini-grid space, which I think people would relate to.
Thank you.
And yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yes, so thank you for the presentation. It's incredibly useful. And I'm interested in, you were saying methodology. I'm interested in that part. But I'm interested in, so for example, can you at this stage say that, let's say, a community with which you have worked already for a while, so that you have time to see before and after in relation with capabilities, and then in relation with how that pans out in everyday life. So have you been able to see how, and then I'm curious, which are those capabilities have an effect in leading the life they want to? I am interested in that, and how do you measure that? Can you measure that? Should you measure that? And how do you do that? Because I guess you need to have some saying, yeah, look, this is the change and this is what we have achieved. So I'm curious about that.
Yeah, that's a great question. And thank you for asking that, because that's something which we find challenging to do, and something we would love to find a partner to work with that would allow us to do that. The challenges that we faced in this is not just in terms of community engagement or that, it's also the mini-grid development the timelines that it takes to develop projects.
Yeah.
So for example, being involved from beginning to end, sometimes that can take a long time, just because mini-grids in itself, sometimes they get stalled in terms of permitting, licensing, construction and all of that. So it takes a really long time. But we do want to find project partners where we can get involved early on and then stay with the community to kind of measure some of that. So we have collected as much information as we can from communities like the ones in Malaysia that we ran the workshops with in 2017. Unfortunately, a lot of it is anecdotal. Like, what we want to do is, a full-on impact evaluation, but it would take a lot of resources.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was thinking about that exactly. And, more than, I think, if I might say, I am particularly a friend of things that are meaningful. So why should you measure and what should you measure? But really to see, how can we do this better? Or, what is it in the community that we have still not achieved, and how can we then go that mile further? This is really my interest, more than the formality of measuring, which I'm not really very friend of. So I'm happy. Yeah, I don't know. I might send you an email with this Nepal community. How far are you there?
So the thing with the Nepal communities is that those are with existing systems. And so they have existing systems. We've run 3 workshops with UNDP Nepal. UNDP Nepal is, they aim to run 7 more in other communities, hopefully this month or next month. They're still planning it out. And then I think, they've been very on board with us continuing to engage with the community so that we can kind of still collect information. And so I think that that's definitely something that we can continue to do with these sites. Yeah,
I see that. Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you for the answer. It's a wonderful project also. I think any project has certain strengths, and then other things to then find ways in which you can then extend that. And I think the part of really enhancing the life of people is clearly achieved. Now, the thing would be, okay, how do we measure that, and how can we demonstrate that we have had impact so we can continue, or, get some funding or whatever it is.
Yeah. I will say this, in terms of a sort of, how would I say this? Like a value-based sort of approach, to what we want to do, or ideally, when we started out in 2017 with COMET, we really wanted to ensure that the capabilities that we were enabling were defined by the communities.
Of course.
And so before we ran COMET workshops, we would do our social baseline assessment that would also involve them articulating the capability set that they wanted to see with electricity access. And, you know, what we would have wanted to do was, yeah, like be able to measure that, you know, down the road. I guess what I wanted to say here is that if 5 years down the road, they were able to measure that capability set and how successful the system was at enabling that, the success of the COMET approach is really in that, and not necessarily the energy system.
I understand that exactly.
Yeah,
I understand that perfectly. And I think that's where the challenge is, because it's all really, you're really into the human aspect. And that's where the challenge of measuring anything comes in, because, you know, how can you, and in which words, and what does it mean, and how does it mean that for that particular community? So it's a very contextual based, I think. And I get that your value is really in getting from the community what is it that they want to develop through whatever you're offering there. And I think that's the value of your project.
Thank you very much, Caroline, for the great summary. And this is exactly what we would like to see from technologies, empowering communities, empowering people. And I think this is a really, really good approach for the things we are doing now in Kyrgyzstan, where we're also working on energy security and energy poverty. And I saw a couple of participants from Kyrgyzstan joining us today. So I hope it will be some traction. But our time is running out. We planned for 45 minutes, but it was so interesting and so engaging that we stayed whole hour. Thank you very much, COMET colleagues, for bringing this really rich experience. Please send me your slides in PDF or whatever form you would like to share, and we will share through our channels. We are doing recording, and I hope to have it online at YouTube soonish, and we will continue. So thank you very much for being first, and thank you very much, Jose, Lorena, for bringing us together. And I think this was great. So thanks a lot, and we stop here.
Thank you very much. Yeah,
Thank you, everyone. This was amazing. Thank you.